Hi Arjava, I'm happy that we meet again and can discuss more of our Reiki topics.
Hi, Walter. Nice to see you.
Well, today I think on our itinerary is the thing with why people need training for doing Reiki and why you uh, were publishing these Usui and Hayashi handbooks. I think many people even don't know that they exist, that there is something written from the founder and from Dr. Hayashi about Reiki, isn't it?
Yeah. So I came across both the Usui, the original Usui handbook, and the Hayashi handbook in the late 90s. And I decided to publish them as they were found, because I thought if this is what the teachers, the senseis gave to their students, then that really belongs in every Reiki household. Yeah? So
That's what I guess.
they gave manuals, and we do the same. So I thought that would be a good thing for everybody to have. Now, both of us know that many people think that Reiki is intelligent and you just place your hand somewhere and then the Reiki just knows just where to go. But that's not really what it is.
Well, yeah, that's one of the Reiki myths which are well around, and I often also hear that people were taught you don't have to learn anything about Reiki. Reiki will teach you. So I've never come across a dream or something, a daydream that was like Reiki appeared in front of me and told me you have to place your hands there. You know.
No, obviously it doesn't go like that. Of course, there is some truth in it, yeah? From my point of view. So when people say that Reiki will teach you, to me, it means that if you practice, you gain experience, and by your experience, you learn. So it's not really the Reiki that is teaching you, but the learning teaches you. Huh? But then I see that again and again in groups when people do a Reiki first degree Shoden or something. Afterwards, they're afraid to go out and touch people. They're not confident. And they don't really know what to do. So for this, I think the manuals are great, because you can then look up what do you do when somebody has an issue with the pancreas or with the liver or with the kidneys. And those manuals will then tell you, okay, put your hands here, there, 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 there. Yeah? Of course, we tend to think that if somebody has a problem with the liver, it's only the liver, but all these guys belong together. Yeah? So,
in a way.
they're all connected, yeah? Like us.
Yeah,
So,
like us.
so it needs serious training and serious instruction, and that takes time.
Definitely so. And I think it's really important to understand that it's not forbidden to write something about Reiki. I remember what kind of shitstorm there was when I published my first Reiki book. Well, how could you dare to write something about Reiki? This is not traditional. And at that time, I was more than 20 years in Eastern martial arts and meditation methods and so on. I've met masters. I did trainings with them, and I never heard something like that. That it's forbidden to write something down about Japanese or Chinese or Vietnamese spiritual art. If you look at Zen, you have kilometers of books in the libraries about Zen. You know.
When did you do your first book?
I did my first book. Well, in fact, I did it 88 when I was second degree, but it wasn't meant as a book. I did this as a manual for a 1-year class, which I gave once or twice every month, because when I was trained in first degree, I started immediately to find out a lot of things which I prefer to name as shortcuts, you know. So like if you put your hands somewhere and you don't feel much, that there's no much reaction, you do something I call homeopathic touch in the aura or on the skin, or you place a clear quartz under your hand and boom, yeah, energy goes out of whatever reasons, or that you combine this with yoga position, or that you combine this with breathing, these kind of things. So I had a big manual, and I wrote this with my Atari, you know, Atari
Yes, yes, yes.
computers at that time. They were, wow, you know, that's what I wanted to have. So I wrote this in a document editor where I could write one page only at a time. And when I was initiated and trained as a master, that was in September '89, I immediately started to give classes. So then it was about November, I think, where I thought, well, I have such a big manual, it's like a book. Why not publishing this as a book? So I called the Ansata Publishing House in Switzerland because I liked the covers in some of their books, but they told me Reiki is not their kind of cake. So they referred me to Winfeld Verlag. They said they do Reiki. So I called Winfeld Verlag. I had Monica on the line, one of the owners that time, and I told her about my manual, and she said, well, send it over to me. So I was printing everything out, send it over to her, and then I expected her to tell me next phone call, well, yeah, you need to work on this and that, and maybe in 2 or 3 years you come back and then we see, and so on. But instead she told me, oh, well, yeah, you see, we need to have this in 6 weeks so we can publish this for the Frankfurt Book Fair. And by the way, it looks a little bit like a manual. Could you make it more like a book, you know? So then I was shocked, and bombshell traumata was hitting me because I never thought this will be a book. So I meditated a lot and then started to write with my new program, which wasn't a document editor anymore. It was software like Protex, where I could really do ongoing writing. I was putting this in a more book-like format, and that became my Reiki handbook. And I had one big issue in the beginning. The Winfeld owners told me that at that time, the owners of bookstores, even of esoteric bookstores, didn't want to touch Reiki books at all. So most of the books were sold at that time via seminars. So the seminar teachers or masters were buying the books and were reselling them to the students. And so they told me, is there anything which you can do so the book owners experience that this is not the emperor's new clothes, you know, that there's something real in it. So I combined the muscle testing from applied kinesiology with the chakras, did something I teach until today, the systematic chakra healing. So I tested their chakras in regards to a certain issue they had, they didn't tell me. And then I was doing aura work with Reiki and charging the chakras, and afterwards they were strong. And nearly everyone then bought Reiki books, which they didn't do before. So I had a lot to do at the book fair, and this was how my first book came into the bookstores. It was, in fact, a manual for a year's class.
So that was in 89 or 90? Or
that was 1990. The book came out 1990, and I was getting in contact with Winfeld. That was end of 89. And at that time, you know, whatever we knew about Reiki was fairy tales, like Christmas.
Yeah, I remember when after I published the first book, The Reiki Fire, there was a lot of trouble coming my way. I didn't expect it. Yeah. And one of the things after the book was out, for 3 days in German, I got a letter, and you got the same letter from some American Reiki association at the time. And they told me that I had broken secret Japanese laws.
Oh gosh, yeah, I remember.
That I was going to get into hell and big legal troubles. And then the publisher asked me to talked to a Japanese lawyer, and he wrote an affidavit for me. I still have it here. It's very funny. He said, those secret Japanese laws are so secret that even a Japanese lawyer doesn't know them.
Oh, I remember the reply from that group that someone was writing, even if only one person knows it, you need to respect it.
So then, of course, I did some thinking, wondering where does this myth come from of the oral, what they call the oral tradition. Yeah? Mm-hmm. And I realized that this is a misunderstanding of Shinto culture. Yeah. So in Shinto culture, the Shinto people, they believe that every word has spirit power. Mm-hmm. And they call that kotodama, but it has spirit power only when it is pronounced. So it must be spoken, and therefore in Shinto there are no written texts, because they are against Shinto philosophy, really. Because a written word has no content, has no power. And for some reason, somebody in Reiki thought, oh wow, that's a nice idea, and applied that to Reiki, but that has no relation to Reiki whatsoever. Even Usui Sensei, Hayashi Sensei published books, and meanwhile we have found some other Reiki books from the 1930s. So it's there is no question about.
Also, the presidents of the Nihon Usui Reiki Gakkai, I think they published books about Reiki, right?
Yeah, wait, it's called the Usui Reiki Yoho Gakkai.
Oh, okay.
Not Nihon or anything. They don't publish for the public. They just republish the manual that Usui Sensei gave to his students again and again and again. But there were other people who were publishing. One was a well-known politician at the time, Homeopathic Sensei. He was one of the 5 Japanese who signed the peace treaty in 1951 between Japan and the world, and he wrote his memoirs, and the last 10 pages are about Reiki and about Usui Sensei and about treatments. So it was not, and he was a member of the Usui Association.
I see. And Mrs. Koyama, didn't she write a booklet about also newer Reiki methods?
No, this was only given to some of the members.
Okay. So it wasn't a publicly published book.
No, it was never published. It was just a document that she did for the higher level students and gave it to them.
Okay.
That was kind of a secret.
I see. So, what I also heard is that Takada had a problem. She feared to be persecuted, and this is why she didn't want her students to write anything down, because she thought that if there is no evidence, then there is no one who could put her to court.
Who knows?
It's difficult to say why, but we know definitely that there is no tradition or no spiritual reason why we shouldn't write about Reiki and read about Reiki.
No, not at all. It's good. Of course, it's good. The more you know, the more background information you have, the more you know the culture, the better it is. And then as far as the treatments, it's my opinion, the first thing a new Reiki student should do is get an anatomy textbook and learn a little bit of anatomy, because if you don't know about the body, it's going to be difficult to be treating people.
If people think that the kidneys are up here somewhere, then...
Right. So before we said that there is this myth that Reiki is intelligent and that it knows where to go. So intelligence is just a human idea. It's a human.
Definitely. And it's overstated. I know many very happy people who would be understood by academics as under normal intelligence, but they have a great life, they have a wonderful life, and I know many academics who don't, you know. So
Yeah, so it's not intelligent. Yeah, so
no.
the way that I look at it, my philosophy is that Reiki is like light.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so when you go into the basement, into a dark basement, and you turn the light on, boom, the light is everywhere. It doesn't go
Right.
everywhere. It is everywhere.
It is everywhere. Right.
And with Reiki, I see it the same way. So if you touch somebody, and let's say you touch their head or their shoulders
Mm-hmm.
or wherever, the light just goes on, whoosh, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and goes into the body. But the most intense radiation of the energy is obviously where the hands are.
Yes,
Yeah?
it is.
And therefore, we must know where we want to touch our students.
Yes, there's a focus where we put our hands, and my impression is that it's also radiating around the hands a bit. And what I sense often, and I heard from other Reiki practitioners, when you come into a room where there is some disharmony, even if you don't know it, your hands start to tingle. That the room pulls Reiki out of your hands, out of your aura. Also, when sitting close to someone who has some issues, that you feel that the hands getting active, you know, these kind of things. Not all the time, but I've experienced this, and so I think it's uh, it's more like a focus when you put your hands on or when you look at someone that there's Reiki, but that also your aura gives Reiki.
So generally, I think, yeah, that
Mm.
after your Reiki initiation and once you begin to work seriously and you do it a lot, your whole system becomes just more permeable
Yeah.
for
Yes.
anything, good and bad. Huh?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So you're more sensitive and you pick up all sorts of stuff. Huh? Then from a Reiki philosophical standpoint, I want to quote again the Usui manual that we've talked about previously a few
Mm-hmm.
times. He says that mainly the Reiki comes out of your hands because these are the most useful tools really for
Right,
us,
right.
but also the feet. Yeah, so you could be doing Reiki with your feet at home, for
Yeah.
example, or with your pets or something, no problem. Maybe not with your clients to put the feet on the face. And also that it comes out intensely through your eyes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We all know when somebody stares at you, how you can
Yeah,
feel it.
yeah.
And your breath, but
Mm-hmm,
it also, he says, radiates from all the pores of your skin.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this is what we're talking about. Yeah? There's a continuous oscillation
Yeah,
process, and
yeah.
if you pay attention, because
That's an important point, Arjava, I guess. What I sense since I teach Reiki, you know, whenever I go to a class, I call in the lineage, the spiritual lineage. And whenever I did that, I feel this intense energy being with me. And then I know also that people start to receive kind of healing if they open up to it. Not everybody, but some do. And that there is another mood inside of me, calmer, relaxed, you know, this kind of thing. And after about an hour or two, when the class is finished, it fades away. So it's for me, it's always impressive to feel that there is a presence when you teach Reiki, which supports.
absolutely, yeah, because
Mm.
you're manifesting that teaching there. Yeah. For me, I feel it very strongly when when I chant the principles,
Yeah.
which I do in Japanese. Yeah, and the way it's done, you do the
Mhm.
gasho, yeah, hands
Mhm.
together, and then in Japan they used to say them very quickly. I'll do it once. Yeah?
Yeah,
So it
please do it. Please do it.
goes like this. Kyo dake wa ikaru na shinpai suna kansha shite gyo o hagene hito ni shinsetsu ni. Yeah? And when you do this, immediately the Reiki goes on and you feel this pulsation in your body, in your hands, off your body. The whole thing is just vibrating. Doom, 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 doom. And if you do this in a, let's say, darkened room or something, or against either a white or dark wall, you can really see it coming out of your hands, but coming out from everywhere, from your aura, from your etheric bodies. That's what happens.
It's what happens, definitely.
And people get well just by being around you, and not because you're so great.
No, that nothing to do with it.
Nothing to do with that. Just that's what it is. And this brings us to another Reiki myth, which is that you always need the permission to do Reiki with somebody. If the Reiki, as we said, comes out of you anytime, all the time, oscillates, and hits people that are sitting next to you, what you're going to do?
You cannot ask them for permission. No. But
if you're sitting on the plane and you say, well, sir, I don't know if you want to sit here because I have Reiki, and Reiki comes from Usui Sensei, was a Japanese, and really maybe you want to sit somewhere else. That's crazy.
That's quite true. The only situation where I recommend to ask people is for distant treatment, because well, I've seen it working really strongly, so people get into into a relaxed state very soon. And there was one time when I was experiencing this with a cat. It was, I think, 1990, right after I became master. I had two cats. One small one, a gray one, a she cat, and a big tomcat. And this big tomcat needs to be castrated because he wanted to mark every part of the flat, didn't work out. So I wanted to give him afterwards some distant Reiki. And you might know that cats sometimes they have their moods, and then they run around, and over the furniture and so on. And he was in that mood. So he was coming into the room and whoa. And then I started the distant treatment. And at the moment when I finished the third time, his name, Bagheera, he was going from to like in slow motion, And I thought, what the heck is that? So I stopped the treatment, and immediately after I stopped it, he was going on like that. That was so impressive, Another thing which I came to know was one of my students. She did lots of classes with me, and her daughter, she had a brain tumor, and the brain tumor was misdiagnosed. They thought the medicals thought she had bulimia, but she did not. She just had a brain tumor. So she was in a coma for 1 year, and she was in intense care with all the machines, So the mother was really worried about her because the doctor said a 5% chance that she will survive. So she was very sad and phoned me and asked her, do you apply Reiki to her? She said, no, I didn't dare because of the doctors and so on. I told her, come on. The medicals I know usually have no problem as long as you don't interfere with their treatment. So I asked her to just tell them and ask whether it's okay for them. She did, and nobody had any problem with that. So she was going there every day for 1 year, and treated her daughter several hours. And the interesting thing was, whenever she was treating the daughter, all the machines showed different values. And also that she needed some of the medication more than other. And this was going on for 1 year. And after a while, every nurse and every medical doctor was convinced that there was something going on which was really positive.
Mm.
And the daughter survived, and she got back alive. She was completely cured from that. And so I think that it's a good idea when it comes to distant healing to ask permission. But I agree totally. When you sit close to someone, you don't have to tell them the story of Usui and what Reiki is and whether they want to sit close to you and so on. That would be a little bit harsh.
The way I look at the
Yeah.
needing permission for something, I'm very, in that way, very pragmatic, very
Mhm, mhm.
practical. So if, let's say, somebody comes and says, hey Walter, would you like a massage? Yeah? And you're not in the mood, you say, oh
Mhm.
no, thank you. And then what is he going to do? Chloroform you and say, well,
Yeah,
you will
sure.
get it? No. Yeah? You need the participation of the other,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, for
Mm.
a hands-on Reiki treatment or massage. And the same is true for distant work. If somebody doesn't want it, why you want to waste your time?
Mhm, mhm.
For what?
Exactly.
Yeah, but it's not so much the permission that I'm concerned about, more the participation, because we know that if somebody starts to receive Reiki, their life is going to change. They must be ready to
Mm.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they're not interested, then
When someone comes and tells me, my spouse needs Reiki, so you need to send him Reiki, I usually won't do.
no, I don't do it. Yeah, but in the family, of course,
That's different when
that's a
there are kids, when there are people who cannot take care for themselves or whatsoever. You just do what you would do otherwise too. You take care for them.
right. And
Yeah.
I think that you the simplest recipe or formula is you just do what's right.
Mhm. Right. Yeah.
And you know what is right and you know what is wrong. Everybody, I
Mm.
believe everybody has that inner wisdom,
Mhm,
and you
mhm,
just follow that and you're good.
mhm.
Oh,
Yeah.
but that's not only true for Reiki, it's true for
For
everything
everything.
in life. Yeah?
Yeah. People just need to get rid of their fears and that they want to prove who they are and that they are strong and spiritual and whatsoever. Just listen
Mhm.
to the heart instead, what the
Yeah,
heart tells you.
simple.
Yes, it is. It is.
Simple and difficult.
Well, that's why we meditate, right? When you were publishing these books about the Usui handbook and the Hayashi handbook, I think the first time it was in the book we wrote together with William, the Spirit of Reiki, right? You were putting the material in it, and later you were publishing separate books with beautiful photos and comments additionally.
No, I think the Usui handbook came out in '99.
Yeah.
That was the first,
Ah,
my third book, and then afterwards we did the
Spirit of Reiki.
Spirit of Reiki, or in
Yeah.
German it's called the Reiki Compendium,
Right. Right.
together, and that
Mhm.
was a fun project.
Definitely.
Yeah, because at the time I remember life was, for me, was difficult at the time. Yeah? I got
Hmm, hmm.
so much negative stuff coming my way that I was
Hmm, hmm.
kind of desperately looking for allies, for people
Hmm.
who were interested, people who were ready to listen, who were ready
Yeah.
to research. Yeah? And you were the first one, and we went together to Japan and looked at all the places. And then William was the next one. Yeah? And
Yeah.
then things started to improve, because we started doing things together and not fighting with each other. And it was very
That
good.
was really important. It was in the 90s. It was really difficult to do research and development when it came to Reiki.
Yeah, of course, the reason was that doing research in Japan is really a trip and a half. It's very,
Mhm.
very difficult and very time consuming. And if you don't speak Japanese and you don't know the Japanese kanji, it's a pretty much
You can't.
impossible to
Yeah.
find anything.
Mm.
I was just at the right place at the right time with my former wife. Yeah, so
That, and you were really focusing on doing that research. You were dedicated to it, and I was really sad when some years later, in the beginning of the 2000s, I was teaching in Brazil. You know, in Rio de Janeiro and
yes,
places.
yes, I remember.
Yeah, and then I was running into some books written by a Brazilian well-known Reiki master whose native language was Brazilian Portuguese, and he even did not speak any English. And of course, no word of Japanese, but he was kind of editing your books and brought them out like he had done the research in Japan. And this was making me sad, you know, seeing all this wonderful research and someone else who did not even know another language was claiming that he did travel Japan all over and speaking to these people and so on. That wasn't okay, you know.
Yeah, I remember his. He had a student. She was, I think, half Brazilian, half British or something.
Mhm.
And she wrote to me that he had asked her to translate my first two books
Mhm.
because they were so much needed in Brazil for all the public. And then she was totally shocked that he published them under his own name. And then, but I have to tell you a funny story. I think today is the day for funny stories. So after that happened, of course, I was upset. We
Mhm.
considered what we could do legally, but it's very difficult when
Forget it.
something is
Never
translated. You
works.
cannot. Yeah?
Yeah.
And then one day I was just before going to India, I said to my former wife, I said, you know what, this guy, I'm going to meet him at the Osho ashram where I'm going. Yeah? And she looks at me and she goes like, oh, Arjava is crazy. Huh? Why would you meet a guy from Brazil there? Huh?
Mm.
I said, I'm telling you. And she just kind of brushed it off. And then a few weeks later, before I left to India, again, I said, by the way, you know, I'm going to meet this guy. I'm telling you. And she's like, oh. So at the time at the Osho ashram where I went, I was teaching there.
Mhm.
They had this habit of doing demos. Like you could show what you do and say, okay, next week I'm doing this group and this is what we're going to do.
Mhm. Mhm.
At the time, there were thousands of people. And I did a demo and there were maybe 200 people just enjoying. We were doing some of the Japanese Reiki techniques. I showed some of them. And after the demo, I was supposed to interview people who were interested in joining the group. Yeah? So some
Mhm.
people came and I asked them, okay, have you had Reiki training beforehand? Because that was one of the prerequisites. They had to have Reiki 1 or Reiki 2. Yeah?
Mhm.
Okay, so comes this guy whom I had seen sitting in the front row, and when I looked at him, all I felt was like feeling guilty. Yeah? Thinking, why do I feel guilty from somebody who's here and hopefully enjoying himself? Yeah? So he comes for the interview with a translator, and the translator says, okay, he would like to join the group. I said, okay, does he have Reiki 1? He says, yes, I have. And the translator says, well, actually, he's so humble. He's a great master from Brazil. I say, are you so and so? He says, yes. I'm, I'm cracking up. I screamed at him. I said, get out of my sight, you bloody thief. Fuck off. That was him. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I still laugh about it.
So you are clairvoyant, Ajava. You should do a second career as being clairvoyant.
I am, but only occasionally. You can't rely on it. It happens when it happens.
That must have been very funny.
I couldn't believe it. And then I looked very angry, but inside I was just laughing my head off because of of this story. It was so funny.
That is a really good practical joke, isn't it? Wow. Yeah, when you published these books, Usui and Hayashi's handbooks, I was so happy because that was the first time where I could put my hands on something which really came from the founders of what we were doing and enjoying all the time. That was like, Easter and Christmas, something like that. And then what I like so much in these books, I can read them again and again, and you find always something interesting, which brings you further, which makes you think. And when you look at the position, that they not only use anatomy, they also use energetical anatomy, that even they don't talk about meridians and chakras and whatever, but when they treat specific positions, it only makes sense if this is about chakras or meridians. So that also is for me something which closed a kind of gap, because when I was taught about Reiki in the end of the 80s, it was like chakras don't belong to our tradition. Now, I know that chakra is an Indian name, but the energy centers, with whatever name you call them, are with every human being. So it's like having arms, And so I think telling someone that this is a tradition to have chakras is not reality.
Yeah, okay. The Japanese obviously don't use those terms, but they
No, they
have their
don't.
own terms for
Yeah, yeah.
these places. Yeah, of course. Yeah, and every human being has them. That's clear. I remember when I brought out the Usui handbook. Um, we didn't want to publish just text. We thought we'll do some nice pictures. So I got one of my students from my English school, which I ran at the time, to be the model. And we noticed that in the Usui handbook, there was a lot of focus on vertebra, on the spine. Yeah? So Usui Sensei used to treat the spine a lot. Yeah? And I'm rediscovering that now.
Oh yeah,
And
it's
really, really enjoying it a lot. Yeah? Because somehow that got forgotten, that part.
yeah.
In the let's say Western Reiki teaching, and it's really important to work on the spine, because if the juices don't flow properly, of course the organs can't function
No, they
properly
don't.
either. Yeah? And then later on, when we found the Hayashi manual, his focus was more on organs. Huh? Of course, he was a medical doctor, so that's where the two manuals are a little bit different. The same, but a little bit different way of looking at it. Very interesting.
Which is fascinating because it's a broader view of the
Yeah.
same topic.
Yes, exactly.
And what I also like a lot is that Uzui used a kind of massage, that he was moving the hands over the body or was doing some touching, and combined this with Reiki, because that was something which I found out in the beginning of the 90s, when I was touching people and a little bit moving my hands, not really massage, but like that, that then energy was doing more often than when I just compared to having the hands and they lay still.
Yeah, I think it's natural.
Mhm.
When we were kids, no, our mom used to stroke our
Yeah.
bellies, and it's very comforting, and it stimulates the body, the lymph, everything. So Usui Sensei said in his manual that you use light stroking and light massaging the body besides the Reiki. That's wonderful. So, and any massage therapist who has been initiated into Reiki, of course, gives his people not only massage, but they get the Reiki as well. Yeah, of course, you would incorporate anything really in your treatments. If you notice that, let's say the shoulders are very tight, of course, maybe you massage them,
Mhm.
and then the Reiki will go in more easily.
That's what I like so much when doing Reiki, that it combines quite naturally with other methods, whether it's, Feldenkreis or yoga or Qigong or massage. It just works together. Fascinating.
Yeah, it's a fascinating system, and the fact that a Japanese person came up with physical therapy and touch, it still blows me away today. Because the Japanese people are not very physical. They don't
No,
touch
it's not
each
common.
other.
They
Not at
don't like to
all.
touch.
No.
Ah,
Yeah, they communicate more, differently.
verbally or.
Verbally or with body movement, with
Mhm.
little or sounds or,
I've heard that during the Meiji period, there was a big turn um, in the mood of people, that before they had no taboo against being naked, and afterwards it was quite a problem. Is this the same with being touched? Was it different before that period?
I don't know.
You don't know. You
I
have
don't
to
know.
have lived there.
No, I don't know. And this was actually with the nudity, this was before I think a little bit before the Meiji period, and it had to do with the Christian
Oh,
missionaries who came in.
yeah, yeah.
It freaked them out.
Mhm.
Yeah, it freaked them out to see all the ladies running around topless, because in the 17 and early 1800s, the Japanese women were running around topless. Huh?
Mhm. Like in many countries of the world, I've
Yes.
done some research about ancient spiritual paths, and uh, in Crete for thousands of years it was like that. And what I was fascinated, um, I heard a great TED talk by an Islamic lady. She did research about the time of Muhammad and found out that at his times and centuries later, women were running around him topless. So they didn't wear veils or whatever. It was just the fashion.
Mm.
And that also they addressed directly the prophet. So there was no thing you have to ask your husband to ask the prophet. It was being
Mm.
directly. And she stated, if we would live true um, Islam like Muhammad did, then there wouldn't be any problem with between men and women. That
For
was it.
sure, for sure not. For sure not. And you can see with Usui Sensei, who died in 1926. That's not even 100 years ago.
Yeah.
We know so little about him, and we know so little about what he actually did and didn't do. Imagine some religion that started 1,000 or 2,000 years ago.
Yeah,
Things change very, very quickly, and
they
things
do.
are adjusted by
Mhm.
people very, very quickly.
Mhm. This is why I consider your research so important, because if we know about the roots, if we have a fundament, then we can develop well on that fundament. But we have no idea what Usui really did, then it's difficult, like it was in the 80s and early 90s, where lots of fairy tales were getting around Reiki. It was such a major problem to do anything like, yeah, combining this with other healing arts, for example, with crystals or breathing. And I found out that when people are allowed to combine Reiki with what they already have learned and what they already practice, it comes quite natural to them to develop their own style.
Right, right. I remember when we found out from Ogawa Sensei in 93 95 or 96 that Usui Sensei used to use quartz crystals. And I
Okay.
remember telling you, and you were so happy. I will never forget that, yeah, because
I
you
will.
had gotten into trouble with that, with the Reiki Association at the time, and now you found out that the founder himself was doing the same thing. Yeah. So when I teach, I don't mix things.
Mhm.
Yeah. But when I practice, of course, my whole life experience is with me in that room. Yeah. And then whatever happens, happens.
I think it's quite important to focus on something when you pass it on. But at the same time, it's a good idea to let people know, see, this is what I have to give you, and if you want, you can combine it. You just
If I, yeah, yeah. If I look at Usui Sensei, he strikes me as somebody who's not interested to educate some nice sheep, you know, as disciples, who run after him and say yes and to everything that he says and does. What he strikes me as a person who likes people to be free
Mhm.
and who likes people to realize their own potential, and as part of that, people who realize their own individual way of giving treatments.
Yeah.
Yeah? So there is no one way you should give treatments, one right way. There exists nothing like that. The only right way to do it is the way you do it. Yeah?
Mhm.
You have a different type of touch. You have a different types of warmth in your fingers. They are shaped differently, and you, after a while, you just follow your
Intuition.
special way, your intuition, and of course your experience. Yeah?
Yes, of course.
And
Experience
that
is important.
that's going to be different for everybody. Yeah? And
Mhm.
I notice also some people really love livers. Yeah? Or kidneys. I love kidneys. I love treating kidneys. Yeah? So there's not one special way that you must do it, but you must find your own way.
Mhm.
Yeah?
Mhm.
And then you're good. It's irresistible. If you do something with a passion and with something that fits with your personality, with everything, yeah, it's irresistible.
I think that's the same with any kind of art. When I studied Tai Chi Chuan many years ago, my master always had something to criticize. You know, you're not moving your hand right, you're not moving your hips right, and so on. And then there was a moment where I felt completely in sync with what he was doing. And he told me, you know, it's not right what you do. But I said, come on, I did exactly what you do. He said, this is why it wasn't right.
Mm, mm,
Uh, he just tried to teach me up to the point that I could copy that. And from that moment on, it wasn't okay to copy anymore. And
yeah,
I think that it is, it goes with any kind of art, whatever you do, that you first need to really get it, because you cannot develop something out of an art you didn't understand, you know. But
mm,
if you understood it, then it's natural that your own kind of branch develops, your own kind of blossom develops. Like Hayashi didn't do exactly what Usui did.
no.
He followed the spirit, but he did not follow the. I've heard that Osho said, "Follow my scent instead of follow my words or whatever," something like that. You know
Mm.
that much better. But I think that's it. That it's important to keep the core intact while putting this into a shape which suits you.
Yeah, and the let's say Usui Sensei's spirit was this. Yeah? He said that he would really like his students to surpass him one day,
Mhm.
yeah? To become better at it than him. Yeah?
Mhm.
So he wasn't interested in creating carbon copies or interested in keeping the student small and him big, and nothing like that. He wanted the students to become super professionals. Yeah? And
Mm-hmm.
that's the spirit. And I suppose Hayashi Sensei was just like that.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah? And any good teacher is just like that. You help your students to grow into their potential
Mm-hmm.
with the hope that they'll be doing it really good. You don't hinder their
No,
development. Yeah? You encourage them.
that is definitely a kind of, let's say, crime in a way, because whenever you pass something on, you set a seedling, and the seedling needs to unfold in the way which is individually suited to it, and not to you. While it's the same kind of tree, it's not the same tree.
Yeah, it's funny that we have this issue in the Reiki community. If you research, you will find people who say, "Oh, Usui Sensei didn't teach Hayashi Sensei everything."
Mhm.
What kind of teacher would give the teaching permission to somebody who is not ready?
Mhm. Mhm.
That's ridiculous, yeah. And then you go in the next generation. There are people who say, "Oh, Hayashi Sensei didn't give Takata Sensei everything." Come on, are you kidding me? Yeah?
Mhm. Mhm.
Then it goes on and on and on. I'm sure these stories exist about you too. They do exist about me too. I know. Yeah?
They
That's
do.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you give the teaching permission to somebody, you give it, right? And you can't take it back. And therefore, in Japan, they were doing this very slowly and
Mhm. Mhm.
cautiously in the old days, because once it's done, it's done. Yeah? Can't take it back.
Exactly. And for me, criteria for passing this on is not what I would call it the everyday personality of someone, but how does someone act when he's teaching or healing?
Yeah, that's a different
Which
thing.
is not the same.
Yes.
Yeah. So you could find someone who is really, not the best kind of concert, but when he or she gives a treatment or passes on some spiritual knowledge, different kind of person. So, and when I find out about that, I think it's time to pay respect to that, and then, in my understanding, the person is ready to go.
Yeah, and this you can tell only if you know them well enough.
That's right. This is why I only give long-term trainings for teachers,
Right.
and I also enjoy this most. So usually short training is about 18 months, and the usual training is about up to 2 years. And some of the students they go for other levels, so they are with me for 6 years, 7 years, and I like to see them grow. I like to walk the path together with them, and not that they are all the time with me, but we meet and we discuss things, and that is something I love.
Yeah, I love it too. It's beautiful. Yeah. So
Yeah.
the so-called hierarchy that we find in Reiki is not for hierarchy's sake, not because one is better than the other, but it's just an excuse so we can spend time together and we can watch each other grow, and
Mhm.
yeah, and then little by little the students get more responsibilities. That's the only reason for having all these different
Yeah,
degrees,
yeah, yeah.
subdivisions. In the martial arts, it's the same.
It's the same.
Yeah.
It's the same. Yeah, and it's in some schools, martial arts schools, you have these belts with the colors. I was growing up with judo and Shotokan karate and so on, and you have had these belt colors. And then I was um, getting into a certain kung fu school, and there were no belts, and I always asked myself, why don't they wear belts? And one time I asked the teacher of that school, who was a really 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 knowledgeable and experienced person, and he was just grinning and said, you see, when we do exercise together, then you experience what I can do and I experience what you can do. So what the heck do we need a belt? Um, on the other hand, there was a kind of hierarchy in the way that after a while, when you did practice with some people, you understood that they know much more about than the art than you do. So if you want to know something, you go there, ask them, and then you know better, you know. But I agree totally. These kind of hierarchies, they shouldn't be for themselves. They are not for the sake of hierarchy. They are
No.
for just giving people an idea what is the next step.
Exactly. And as you said, it's helpful to work in a group, and you
Oh yeah,
can see people who are a little bit ahead of you, people that are new, and it's good. It works like a map. Yeah, you see your potential in the senior students, and you see your past in the new students, and that's really good. Huh? It's super.
absolutely.
It's a great
For, for,
system.
for me, training is also about repeating what you seem to know, so that people have to come again and again to the same class. Like when you do Zen meditation, you practice the simple stuff, or when you do serious martial arts training, you do the really simple things, but you need to do them right. You know, like hitting the water in a bowl until there is enough key that water comes out, you know, with one hit. I think people cannot practice too much Reiki meditation or, you know, whole body treatment or these kind of things. They just need to get deeper and deeper and deeper into that.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, yeah, because, for example, in Zen meditation, really, you do nothing. Yeah,
That's the point.
yeah. So, learning to do nothing, it sounds ridiculous, but it takes a lot of time. And in our Reiki treatments, we do the same. Yeah? We do nothing,
Yeah.
nothing at all. Yeah? And that just needs training and training and training and experience and more experience and more experience.
Oh, well, I'm so exhausted. For 8 hours, I didn't do anything, you know, it was woof.
So training is great. Eh? And of
Yeah.
course, if you have a good teacher, and I've always been very lucky to have had really good teachers in all fields,
Mhm.
then the learning goes so much easier.
Definitely. Also, when experienced students are coming together with new students, I've seen that both of them got a lot positive out of it. The experienced students, by explaining something,
Yeah.
learned more,
Mhm.
and the new students, they learned better because the experienced student is not the master. They are closer to the student's position, and sometimes it's then easier for a new student to understand something. But
Mhm.
I don't know what's your experience, but what I've found out from me is whenever I have to explain something and show something, I understand it better.
Yeah, it's the same. Sometimes, because both of us have done so many books, people
Mhm.
think that we are amazing or we have all this knowledge and blah,
Aren't
blah.
we?
So when somebody says that to me, oh, amazing what you have done, you know so much, I say, you know what it is? I write because I want to understand what's going on. It's not that
Exactly, that's the point.
I don't write because I know. Huh? I don't write because I don't know. And then hopefully in the writing process, some clarity arrives. Yeah? And then, of course, you're happy to share that clarity with others. Yeah?
That's funny. It's the same with me. When I write a book, it's a precious time because finally I get clear about certain things while writing them down. And I definitely don't remember anything I've written, you know. So people sometimes tell me, "Oh, you've written this wonderful thing in that book," and I thought, "Oh, really? Well, interesting. I should read it again."
I'm the same. And, sometimes when I have some issues or conflict with somebody or something. And I tell my wife, I said, look, this is what's going on. She says, go down to the office and write about it. Because that's how I digest, and that's how I understand. And I'm the same. I don't remember anything. And then when people tell me, oh, you wrote this or that, I usually say, I lied.
Yeah, that's the difference between learning from books and learning with a presence of a teacher in whatever way. The book, I love books. I have plenty of them. I guess you too, because you can share ideas from people you never would be able to meet because they are dead or living on the other side of the world or whatever. On the other hand, being together with a living teacher is that you don't only learn by listening to his or her words or looking at the actions. I think you also learn by just being in the presence, isn't it?
I'm going to say something that can be easily misunderstood. Yeah?
Yeah.
So for me, the Reiki really is just an excuse.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I don't mean Reiki is bad or it's nothing, not at all, but it's just an excuse, yeah, to transport something else.
Yes, of course.
Which is much more important. Huh?
Yeah.
So Usui Sensei, he transported his enlightenment with Reiki, with the practice. Huh?
Exactly.
Yeah, and that a little seed of that transcendental something is always in any Reiki moment, whether that's a treatment or an initiation or sitting together having tea with Reiki people. Huh? And this is what I'm more interested in, not enlightenment, that's a big word, but just that beautiful, empty state that you get into. This I would like to share with my students. And I noticed that it takes time for them to get the feel of that. Yeah? You can't do that in one day.
No.
Yeah, so it takes time. Therefore, I usually do 5-day trainings, and I know in 5 days, when I have them all day from 10 to 6 or 7 with me, that can be transported and that touches them. And then once that thing is touched, it has a life of its own and it will go on without me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this this idea that Reiki is not what it's all about, it's what Reiki can bring to you. That is very important for me. It's not about Reiki, it's about what can happen if you just allow Reiki to work with you.
Yes.
It's not the finger, it's the moon, you know.
Yeah, right. It's the same, let's say, if you're meditating, yeah, the meditation, the technique is not the thing.
No.
Yeah, it's the space, that sacred space that gets invited and that may come or may not come. That's the thing. Yeah? They surrounding the system, that's not what it is. And with Reiki is the same. Yeah? And it's very beautiful. I love being with people. The longer, the better. Yeah, not because I want to tie them down or anything. I just love being with people. Yeah? That's it.
Yeah. And when being with the people, then something happens which I can hardly put into words, but I know that it happens. When people come together like-minded and wanting to grow, wanting to call in the divine, then something happens which everybody participates in and everybody prospers from. And this is what I love to be a part of.
Right, and that's what people want. Huh?
Yeah.
They may not be able to put their finger on it. We can't describe it either, but that's what we long for. Yeah, that dissolution somehow, having some experience of oneness, of the small self
Yeah,
disappearing and merging with people. That's such a blessing. Yeah.
that's what it's about, right?
Mm.
And I think that is also part of you, um, at least for me, when it comes to the initiations. I love the initiations. And it was when I started in the autumn of '89 to pass on initiations and giving classes and so on, that my poor students, they were, in this position for the initiation. And when I was standing behind them and doing the initiation, I was in the energy and it felt so good. And they were sitting there. So after a while, I was putting a clock in front of me so I could see how much time was going on, because it was so lovely to be with the initiation mood. And I just forgot about, going on and releasing them from the position.
I remember once I was in Lima, in Peru,
Mhm.
and I was giving initiations, and I did them individually at the time. Now I do it in groups. And I had this one lady to be initiated. And when I was done, I rang like a little bell, ding, yeah, meaning, okay, this is it. And then I went for lunch to do an interview with the Peruvian TV station. I came back about an hour and a half later. And I came back, she was still sitting there
No.
like this,
Oh,
because I had forgotten to tell her that when you hear the ding, it means we're done.
she might have had an intense meditation. Oof.
Ay, ay.
Yeah.
One day we should dedicate a whole session to these funny stories. No, there are
I think so. We have a lot of
so
them to
many
tell.
funny stories.
It's once I was doing, I think it was '99 or '91, um, also a class for one person. She asked me for it. She was in her early 70s and was ill, and her husband was ill, and she couldn't come to a regular class and so on. So she asked me, can't we do something like that? I agreed then, and she was looking at me all the time after the initiation, very weird. And I didn't see her again. And then through mutual acquaintances, friends, I've heard that she feared me because she thought I had given some drug into her tea, which I served her, because she felt so different after the initiation. So she didn't want to cross my path again because she didn't want to have anything to do with a drug dealer.
Funny.
Yeah, but the initiations are something precious for me. It's um, my impression is that you're going so deep into, I don't know what the brain scientists say, theta brain waves or whatsoever. It's definitely not alpha, because this I know very well.
Mm.
And being conscious in this kind of state is for me, it's like I'm looking at a different world. I call it initiation world.
It would be interesting to measure the brain
Yeah.
waves, I think, while you do it. I had somebody once who had a um, computer program and electrodes and everything, and they measured my brain waves while I was giving Reiki,
Oh, wow.
and that was amazing. Yeah, so they went immediately within, I don't know, less than half a minute. They went down to theta,
Hmm.
boom, like that. And the guy was looking at me and he said, you should be fast asleep now. Huh? And I said to him, do I look like I'm fast asleep? He couldn't believe it. Huh? It's
Yeah.
amazing what it does to you. So when I suppose during an initiation, it must be.
Yeah. It's It goes
Interesting.
very deep. This is one of the reasons I love initiation so much. And I always think, wow, I'm so blessed that I can do this job and pass on initiation to people and move. For me to use these initiations. I often heard that people say, yeah, if you are in this new energy in the new time, you don't need initiation because everybody have it has it. But that is not my experience. I've seen every time and again that people change after initiation.
Yeah, we discussed it in one of our previous meetings once. I think I told you that Koyama Sensei from the Usui Association, she says that in the initiation, which they call Leiju, yeah, which translated means activating the soul,
Mhm.
a little soul aspect that is planted in the center of our brain gets
Mhm.
kind of activated. And when that is activated, it connects to source. And when that does, the soul emits light. Yeah? And
Mhm.
sitting with that light of your soul, you
Mhm.
get transformed. And as
Yeah,
far as I can see, there is no way around that.
right. That's beautiful. It's a beautiful
That
explanation.
it's a nice thing, yeah, and that must be done in person, and so beautiful and such a blessing if you are able to do this with somebody. Yeah?
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
very, very humbling too, yeah? Because it's, we know it's not you or
No.
anyone could do it, but it's really a blessing and a privilege to be able to share that very precious moment with your students. I love that too.
Yeah, we are just mediators. We pass something on, and while doing that, we have this gifted situation of being touched by the divine. That's at least what I feel when I pass on Reiki or when I pass on initiations.
Right, because it the same thing that's happening to your students happening to you too.
Exactly. Yeah. It also changes the energy of rooms. So it's a kind of feng shui betterment for rooms. I've seen when I give initiations in a room repeatedly, the room changes. Also, the plants in there, they grow better and they don't get ill.
Yeah, I have the same experience. We just built a training center a couple of years back here in Lesbos,
Mhm.
in Greece, and when people come and visit me there, they go like, "Oh, how beautiful!" It's not that beautiful, yeah, but when they
No, it's
come,
the energy.
oh,
Mhm.
wow, so beautiful and so peaceful, because that's all we do. We do Reiki there, we do
Mhm.
meditation there,
Mhm.
and that creates such an incredible vibe. Huh?
Yeah.
So nice. Huh? I love that. Huh?
Well, yeah, Java. I think we covered lots of points this time again. And I'm very glad that we found this opportunity to meet and talk about what we love.
Yeah, it's really fun. So thank you for initiating that.
Well, thank you that we do this together. So I'm looking much forward to seeing you soon and
Yes.
going on with our Reiki stories.
Yes. Okay. See you soon. Bye.